Hey, welcome to the show. I'm here today with Karen Knight. Karen, how are you doing over in British Columbia today?
I'm doing wonderfully well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm glad to have you on. I'm so excited to talk today about everything you ever wanted to know about volunteers. But we had a pre-interview, and I didn't realize how great of a listener you were until I checked my notes for the show because I didn't have anything written down. That's how good of a listener you are. You just let me, you did right there, right what you're doing right now. You just smiled and enjoyed me talking and let me talk the whole stinking time. And then we said goodbye. And it was wonderful meeting you. And I looked down, I had no notes. So I had to go back to your blog on
Well,
Karen
we
Knight.
can do that again. I'm sure your listeners like to hear you, so I'll just let you talk.
My listeners do like hearing me. There's been some incidents where people are like, I wanted to see what you look like and all that fun stuff. But what do you I don't know what to say. But you can go do research like I did at karenknight.ca/blog and check out all the great stuff Karen is doing. But you're like this big volunteer guru. Is that right, Karen?
I don't know how big I am, but I've had a lot of experience. I've done a lot of things with volunteers, having been a volunteer, led volunteers, been on board as a director. Yeah, I've seen it all over the last quarter century or so.
Yeah. Do you have any like really crazy volunteer stories you want to share with us?
Oh,
Don't use
well, there
names.
was the one time.
Don't use names.
No, I'm
Not trying
not
to get
going to
anyone in
use
jail here.
names.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no, I have no desire to be sued. There was the one time I was leading a team of volunteers, and one of them was charged with a criminal offense. So that was interesting. That took a little bit of thinking about how we could do it. Now, it wasn't a violent offense, so we didn't have to pull her off, but people were saying, should we be taking her off the team, all this sort of thing. And I had to sit down and have a thought about that, but it wasn't anything to do with what we were doing. And she had only been charged and, innocent until proven guilty. So we let her stay, and it didn't even come up to court until after the project was over. So yeah, we just went. So, but it set me back a bit. That was the first time that had ever happened, and the only time that has ever happened to me. But yeah, no.
You're not getting a lot of your volunteers on like, ex-con release work programs and all that stuff.
No.
And I'm saying that knowing that there's fully well that there's excellent people that leave the prison system reformed and ready to provide
Absolutely.
stuff. But we're just gonna like dive right into like all the volunteer stuff because I've been a volunteer and I've run organizations where we've had volunteers, and I also see that people get wore out and like it takes a little bit of effort to keep them motivated. So what kind of tips do you have to help keep volunteers motivated? Or maybe it's a communication style that you can really communicate your vision to them so they can really know what it is they're doing and how they're having an impact.
Motivating volunteers, I think the biggest part is it comes down to appreciating them. Just show them you love them. I tell all my clients that thank every volunteer, every shift. Right? If you can be really specific, if you can't, just say great job. But every volunteer, every shift, somebody should be saying thank you to them. Because if you don't feel appreciated, you don't stick around. The other one, I think, is major true.
That's major true.
Yeah. The other one that I find really important, and it gets forgotten a lot, is to draw a really clear line between whatever task you have them doing and how it moves the mission forward. Because people volunteer because they want to help you. They believe in what you're doing and they want to make a difference that way. There was a time I was volunteering for a museum, and they said, okay, well, so I sent in my application. They said, great, show up on such and such a day and such and such a time. So I did, and the person in charge had no idea I was coming, had nothing planned, so she had me do some make work projects, right, while I was there. And that's fine. I mean, hey, first time something happened, blah, blah. That happened 3 times in a row. And that I just showed up. Nobody had anything for me to do. They had me sorting books on a shelf or something like that, something that meant nothing. And I never went back.
Mm.
So be prepared for your volunteers and be able to tell them, if they're sweeping floors, this is why you're doing it. This is how it helps us. It's the whole that story about the janitor at NASA when the president asked him, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." Right? By sweeping the floor and cleaning the bathrooms, right? Because you are, but you have to show that to the volunteer that, yeah, it looks like a nothing job, but it really helps, and this is how. And then they're happy to do things like that.
Really infusing the why and the how it fits into the purpose of whatever the job is, because sweeping floors is sweeping floors. Laying bricks
Right.
is laying bricks. Like, what are you doing? I'm laying bricks. Ask the next guy, what are you doing? He's like, I'm building a wall. Right? The difference between laying bricks and building a wall. You ask the third guy what he's doing. He's like, I'm building a house for God. They're building a church. But you see the
Right.
difference in the perspective in how they relate simple, innocuous tasks. I'm not saying bricklaying is simple, non-complicated tasks, right?
Right.
What the
Right.
difference that is when you actually put that purpose behind it, and how that changes the attitude and perspective of the people that are helping you out. Yeah, I love that.
Exactly.
I absolutely love that. But I mean, that's gotta stink, right? Showing up to help someone and they didn't know you were coming, didn't have anything really worth your while to do, no specific reason you were in that day. I feel like you've
Yeah.
got to have that purpose to know exactly what it is that you're doing and why it matters.
Yeah, exactly. And just like I said, be prepared for your volunteers. Have something planned. Have a job board. If someone shows up unexpectedly, you can still say, yeah, we have these 3 things to do today. Which one do you want? Right. And then help them do that and train them. That's another motivating factor, is training them so that they're not out there fumbling and hoping they're doing it right, because nobody wants to look like an idiot. Right? And if they can be successful at whatever you have them do, it motivates them to come back. Right?
Absolutely. You mentioned in your first response you wanted to show volunteers appreciation. What are some of the different ways an organization can show appreciation to their volunteers?
Oh, there's lots of ways. I kind of group them into 4 different categories. And the first one's kind of informal thank yous. That's literally just coming up to someone and saying, "Hey, great job." Or I really love it when you clean the kennels because I never have to double check it. Right? Things like that. Just general thank yous. And again, every volunteer, every shift should hear that. Right? Not just at some particular time. The second one is kind of a more tangible gratitude. So somebody goes a bit above and beyond and you give them a $5 Starbucks card, something. And that these don't have to be expensive to the organization.
Yeah, then they could buy half a coffee.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. Starbucks, isn't it? I should have said a $10 Starbucks.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
But you talk to these, like I said, these don't have to be cost a lot to the organizations. Most of these like Starbucks or Tim Hortons here in Canada, they're happy to give these out, because when people come in for coffee, they'll sometimes buy a muffin or something else, right? So they're happy to give this stuff out. So something like that, or if you're willing to be a job reference for them, that's another way to show tangible gratitude. A lot of people are trying to pad their resumes and things like that. So yeah, just say, hey, I'm willing to be a job reference for you if you need it, or fill out forms for school or whatever. Those are simple ways that you can say thank you. So.
Oh, absolutely. I know I'm going through, my wife and I are going back through the 5 love languages again, and we feel gratitude. We feel connected in different ways. Like I'm a words of affirmation guy. So if you were to say, Travis, hey, you're doing a great job and you look good and I like your smile, I'm top of the moon. I can say that it's up to my wife. She doesn't care. She's like, yeah, I'm totally, of course. I mean, it doesn't mean anything, right? But if I hold her hand, right, in public, that means something more to her. If I spend time with her, or if I do stuff around the house, like that has more meaning to her. So finding out, you don't know, if you're listening to this and you're not sure how to best appreciate your volunteers, ask them how they would like to be appreciated. You have the answer. Exactly. You just go ask them and be like, I've been telling you thank you and you're doing a great job for the last 5 years. Does that do it for you? Does that have an impact for you? Some people don't care about words of affirmation. They're like, does nothing for me. Or
Right.
I remember reading a story about a top salesman in a company, and they would do these sales awards and stuff at the end of the year, and he won the top thing, and he'd go up there and take their award and have nothing to say because he didn't care about the award ceremony. That's not what he did. That's not what it was about. And just a little bit of digging, like no kidding, 5 years in a row, this guy didn't care about winning the award. They figured out really what connected him, and it was having his family understand what he was doing and that sacrifice he was making. So in the sixth year, when he won it again, they brought his family in, and instead of giving him some BS award, they gave him time off and they paid for a vacation for his family. And that sent him through the roof
Oh,
on
wow.
how he actually felt about the company and what they were
Right.
doing, because they figured out who he was as a person and created a way to really recognize him in the way that he would feel that recognition and that appreciation.
Yeah, I've got another story like that that also fits under this tangible gratitude thing. Is I did an event. I ran a fairly large event, and we had quite a famous speaker come
Mm-hmm.
and do that. And one of our volunteers, this was kind of his guru, his favorite person. So instead of me or one of the boards going and picking this guy up from the airport, we sent this guy, this one volunteer. So he had like an hour and a half one-on-one time with his hero. Right? I mean, how much better
Did the
could
hero
that
ever
be?
come back?
I
was
I
he
don't know.
was he like, yeah, never again?
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's just simple things that can really make a big difference. Another one of my 4 groups is public acknowledgement. Now, whether it's at an award ceremony like that where you stand up, here's our best speaker, or whether it's you have a volunteer of the month and you put them on Facebook and your social media and your webpage and all that sort of thing. A lot of people really like that because they can share it then, right? They can send it to their friends, their family. Hey, I'm the volunteer of the month. And
Yeah.
that actually does something else for the organization too, because it spreads word about the organization,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's marketing for them. And it shows potential volunteers that this is a great place to work for, that they really appreciate their staff. You just
Extra
have to
benefit.
check with them because not everybody wants their face and name all over the internet. So you got to check with them first and make sure that's okay.
I'm on witness protection. Do not put my face on the interweb, please. The mafia in New York's looking for me.
For me.
Not me. This is a hypothetical situation. I'm not
Yeah,
under
sure.
protection from the mob. Blink twice for, I don't know.
And the final one of the 4 are the big events, like the annual general meeting where you award your volunteers 5 years service or 100 hours or whatever, and just have a big event just for the volunteers. And again, find out, like you said, what they want and whether it's a fancy catered dinner or just a potluck barbecue, and give them what they want. They deserve it.
If they're asking for Lamborghinis, they're probably donating their time at the wrong organization, unless you have that kind of money, in which case I would like to volunteer.
Yeah, exactly.
How can I get on board? That would be great.
Hmm.
Where do you find all these great volunteers?
Oh, they're everywhere. They're everywhere.
That's not as helpful. That's not as helpful as an answer as you would think it was. There's someone taking notes right now.
No.
They wrote down everywhere, and they're like, "Come on, Karen, what do you mean everywhere?"
Well, I truly do mean that, though, that we often overlook really good volunteers. It's not so much where they are, it's how you're reaching out to find them. So you are surrounded by really good volunteers. Do they know you exist? Is the question. Right? So you need to be out there, you need to be seen, and you need to be telling people you need volunteers. And your current volunteers are brilliant ambassadors. Have them talk to their friends. Hey, this is really fun. Why don't you come help me one day? Right? Simple things like that. If you want virtual volunteers, post it on things like Volunteer Match in the US or Charity Village. And just about every country has a platform like that. So you catch them up on there. But seriously, just start talking about your organization and your need for volunteers. And this is what you're doing. People are out there and people want to help. I don't know what the stats are in the US, but in Canada, 79% of people volunteer for varying amounts.
79%?
79, according to Stats Canada. 79% of people have volunteered in the past year.
Wow.
So that's, yeah, we're big on volunteering here in Canada. But volunteering,
it's kind of the running joke in the US of like how nice Canadians are, unless they're talking about Americans, from what I understand.
Yeah. Well, we won't go into that. I assume you have Americans in your audience. but yeah, no, people are wanting to volunteer. People want to make a difference in the world, and you just need to pave the path for them, and they'll be there. Literally, they are everywhere. It's up to you to just reach out and find them.
Yeah, if it's 79%, I mean, that's almost 80%. 4 out of every 5 people you bump into have volunteered in the past year in Canada.
Here.
At the Tim Hortons near where Karen lives.
The Tim Hortons now. No, Tim Hortons isn't a volunteer organization, but there you go. But you can talk to people at Tim Hortons and you'll find a volunteer.
There you go. Yeah, you know, British Columbia is one of the provinces I have not been to. I've been to a few. I've been to Manitoba, Quebec, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, but not on the far west British Columbia just yet. I'll have to have a trip up there because Carly Cunningham was a guest on the show, and she's also in British Columbia.
There you go. There's a lot of us here. We're a big place. BC is a lot bigger than all the other states. So, all the other states, all the states. There isn't a state as big as British Columbia. So anyway, go on. What's next?
People volunteer all the time, but I mean, it's got to wear on them after a while, right? People get burned out and they just don't want to continue volunteering. Like, how can you as an organization see that coming, and what can you do to prevent it?
It's actually fairly easy to see coming. If you have a volunteer that's really great and all of a sudden they start missing shifts, or they start getting irritable, or they get really apathetic, they don't do as good a job, chances are either there's something going on in their personal life or they're burned out. And if you're wondering, take a look at what you're giving them, because burnout comes from the organization. It doesn't come from the volunteer. Right? It's what you are doing. Are you giving them too much? And when I say too much, what one person will thrive on will be way too much for someone else. So again, you have to talk to them. But you'll see if all of a sudden somebody who was great just kind of starts dropping off, it very likely is burnout. Because when we have a great volunteer, we tend to give them more, right? I'd rather give everything to Mary because Mary's reliable and she does a good job and I don't have to be standing over her to do it. So I'll give her more and more and more and more. And you start neglecting your other volunteers. And yeah, then Mary's disappears and you're going, okay, what do I do now?
Oh yeah, you see this quite a bit, like in the military. That person that's a really hard charger, a go-getter, you kind of just give them all a bunch of stuff to do, or you're like, hey, so-and-so is kind of struggling. Like, can you take on a few extra tasks? And sometimes that's okay. A short term, maybe one-off, that's not terrible. But if you're constantly finding that you're having someone cover for someone else, I've been in this position where they've asked me to do a bunch of stuff. And I was like, this has nothing to do. Like, this isn't my job. And you know me, I'm more than happy to do things that aren't my job a lot of the time. But like, who's supposed to be doing this? Like, this is someone else's responsibility. And they're like, well, so-and-so is having a hard time. I'm like, I understand that. If I was having a hard time, would you hold me accountable and make me do it? Or would you give my stuff to someone else? And the leader that brought this to me kind of was like, ugh, he kind of cringed. And he's like, you know what? He's like, I would really hold your feet to the fire and expect more of you. I was like, well, maybe it's time to expect more out of them. Maybe it's time that you hold their feet to the fire. And if they can't cut it, they can't cut it. That's fine. But find out. But you're not paying me to do everyone's job. You're paying me to do my job, and occasionally a couple of other things. But it's just like
Mhm.
in the maintenance world, the mechanic world. I did aircraft maintenance for a few years, and you get that one tool that's the same size on like everything you're working on. And if you overuse that tool, it gets wore out. It has to be
Yeah,
replaced because it's just the wear pattern, how things work. And if you overuse those tools, if you overuse and overwork your volunteers and don't show them appreciation and give them a stinking break every now and again, they're going to get worn out. And then that great person that was doing well for you for however long, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, they're done with you and they'll never come back. And it's not about whether or
exactly.
not, they'll work for you. It's like, how are you really giving them too much?
Mhm. And it's really quite easy to solve, and that is to loosen up on your other volunteers. Don't have one of your other volunteers job shadow this one, right? And you can train them up to be a really good volunteer. And then you have 5 or 6 or 10 really good volunteers instead of one that you're always counting on.
It's really hard to meet expectations if you've not trained me how to do anything.
Exactly.
It's super
Exactly.
tough. I can't give you what you want unless you tell me what you want and you've trained me to do it, and then let me go
Do
do
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
come over here and stack chairs. What, like a pyramid? Like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for like a sculpture? Like, what do you mean by stacked chairs? Oh, we're pulling them off the floor and putting them into storage? That I can do. Stacking
Do.
chairs doesn't mean the same thing to different people. You've got to be
Exactly.
specific, give people a little training. But I mean, not all volunteering is stacking chairs. Some of this
No,
stuff
some
can
of
be
it can be
done.
quite complicated.
It can be complicated, it can be involved, but it also can be virtual. I'm sure there's been a huge shift during COVID to people that are volunteering in person. I bet you there's online volunteers, isn't there?
Oh, yes. Tons and tons and tons of them. Um, it's actually it's actually been quite wonderful to watch how some organizations have been able to really spread and keep going through COVID while other ones are hunkering down and saying, okay, they're just trying to wait through this. And yeah, the ones who are trying to just wait through this, yeah, they're not going to survive because
Yeah.
this is getting longer and longer and longer. But there, a lot of people, when they think virtual volunteers or remote volunteers, they think things, okay, we can have a social media poster who someone just posts on social media. They think computers or they think phones, right? Those are the only things. But there's so many other things that a volunteer can do. All your fundraising can be done remotely. Most of your community engagement can be done remotely. Your finance person can be remote, right? All of this stuff can be done remotely with a little bit of rejigging. I mean, there's some things that, yeah, you'll never be able to do remotely. I'm on the board of directors for a therapeutic riding association. Somebody needs to shovel, and I'm sorry you can't do that remotely. But during
Someone's got a
COVID,
shovel. Yeah, absolutely. That
yeah,
stuff
but
doesn't take
during
care of itself, although there is some farming technology that might be helpful, but it's not for everybody, right? Not everyone has that stuff.
yeah, but we actually had summer camps on stable management and things like that were all done online. We did training. We would bring in experts from Britain who would come and talk about horse massage and things like. You can bring in subject matter experts from anywhere in the world now. The
Yeah.
possibilities are endless. I talked to one group. It was an Indian cultural center, and they had someone from India teach traditional dance to the kids. Right? It's
Virtually.
just virtually,
Virtually,
right?
yeah. I mean, even
So
this
yeah, it's
podcast, even right now, what we're doing right now, we are time zones apart, countries
yeah.
apart. And I even started this when I was over in Bahrain, when I was in the Middle East,
Uh-huh.
thousands upon thousands of miles away. We'd have been like, I don't know, 9,000 miles away at that point. We
Mhm.
still could have been doing this thing online, doing it virtually.
Right.
It's something you have to consider and embrace. How many tasks you actually need to be in person to complete.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
it's a lot less than you think. Actually shoveling behind the horses is an in-person type of thing, unless you have machines to do it. But other than that, you can accomplish most everything else
Yeah.
virtually. You can have delivery services. I mean, you can fly it in with drones if you have to. You can be virtual and doing all that stuff. But
Um,
I mean, you kind of have to have someone that runs all these volunteers. Like, has the virtual coordinator job or the volunteer coordinator job changed that much over the last year and a half or so?
the job itself hasn't, how they do it has. So
Mm,
one of the biggest parts for a volunteer coordinator, other than showing your volunteers appreciation all the time, is communication, right? This is what needs to be done. This is how it needs to be done, all this sort of thing. And now it's been like that forever. But how they do it now, it has changed. They try and do a lot more training online. They try and reach out and touch their volunteers virtually instead of in person. So the job itself hasn't changed, just the techniques for doing it. Does that
yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. What makes a good volunteer coordinator?
Mm. There's a few different things. You need to be a people person, first of all. And I'll say this up front, all of these can be learned. These are all skills. I may call them attributes or values or whatever. All of these can be learned. But people skills, you have to be able to get along with everybody, no matter what group they happen to be from, whether it's a different ethnicity or a different sexual orientation or any of that, but specifically people who are of a different worldview than yours. You need to be able to sit down and talk to them and really be open and curious about it. You need to be able to judge people, because you don't want to bring someone in who's bad, because believe me, that can really send things sideways. So you need to be able to look at somebody and say, okay, yeah, you've got all the skills, but I'm not so sure about your attitude. I don't know how you'll carry things out, right? I don't know how you'll get along with other people. So you have to be able to do that. Another one is management skills. There's the supervising, there's the scheduling is huge in volunteer management. Time management, all that sort of stuff. You have to be able to be fairly decent at that. Conflict management, dealing with if things go sideways, how are you going to deal with that, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's some personality traits that you have to be optimistic and try and be cheerful and that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm missing one, but I can't remember it offhand. But those are the main ones. Is yeah, you have to be organized, you have to be friendly, you have to be willing to take responsibility for things. When things go wrong, you have to be able to figure out how to do it and not completely lose your head.
Yeah, I imagine. I've done a few events in my day, and it can go sideways pretty quickly. We had a friend invite my wife and I to her wedding. It was out at Lake Tahoe. It was a gorgeous ceremony, and we're getting ready to head that way, and we get a different kind of call. She's like, "Everyone is bailed. All these things have happened. Could you fly out here and run our wedding?" And we're like, "Yeah, of
Oh,
course."
wow.
So we showed up. There was no coordinator. There was no people serving food. There was a whole bunch of things that happened. And my wife and I like, "Oh yeah, we can do this." I was like, "You handle this, I'll handle this." And we got everyone where they needed to be. We got the food out. We got the alcohol served. We got people with the microphones on, all that stuff. We did it all on the fly while we were there. So we were able to do that for them, which is fabulous. But not everyone can do that. And maybe it was just good timing for us that we were able to do so. But I mean, it doesn't always work that way. And sometimes, volunteers leave on their own, but sometimes you have to make the hard call. And I mean, have you ever been in a situation where you actually had to fire a volunteer?
I have. It's not a very pleasant thing to have to do, but really you have to keep the needs of the organization at the forefront. And if you have a volunteer who is making other volunteers uncomfortable, or is, I mean, you can take it from the gamut, just somebody who makes other people uncomfortable to volunteers who are actually in there stealing. And I've seen the range, right? The ones that are stealing, that's pretty easy to do. You get rid of them and that's done. The
Yeah.
ones who are just in their personality, or they're maybe really people who are really kind of depressing to be around or whatever. And it gets to the point where other volunteers are leaving because of it, and or work isn't getting done, or staff's having mistakes being made that are risky for your clients perhaps. Then if you've sat down with them, you've explained the situation and nothing's changed, yeah, sometimes you have to fire a volunteer. And yeah, that's hard to do. It's hard to do. But again, sometimes it's necessary because you have to protect the organization first.
Yeah, not everyone's cut out for every job, and just because there's a volunteer opportunity, there's a person there, doesn't mean they're the right person for what needs to be done. Even something
Yeah.
as simple as setting out chairs, you might have something that someone has a terrible attitude, or someone that is bad mouthing other people in the organization. Like, you can't have that stuff. I'm a huge fan of the no gossip policy. If you're
Right.
if you're talking about someone, you're not telling me something good about them, I don't want to be around here. I don't want you
Yeah.
talking about it. And if it's my organization, I don't want you here. And you're like, you
Right.
don't tolerate any gossip? No. What are we
Why would
toddler?
we?
What are we, like, school age kids in a small town? We get
High
nothing
school
better to
kids.
talk about. We get nothing better to talk
Yeah.
about. Oh, you know what so
Yeah.
and so did? Oh, was it win the Nobel Peace Prize? Because I want to hear about it. Let's celebrate together. Let's tell everybody. Everyone gather around. Karen's talking about Travis. What do you have to say, Karen? Well, I like
Yeah.
Travis and he's great. And yeah.
Yeah. What's it that Eleanor Roosevelt said is small minds talk about people, right? Great minds discuss ideas, and small minds talk about people. So
That is a woman that doesn't get as much recognition as she deserves.
I don't think you could give her enough recognition.
I don't think so, but like it hasn't hit pop culture. Like, I want to say there was like some kind of like short film or whatever done on her, but like she really needs one of those whiz bang, I don't know, Marvel Cinematic Universe where she's beating Thanos or something. I don't know, but there's always that saying, behind every great man is even a greater woman, and like, no kidding, she was the embodiment of everything that needed to be said and done. I was reading a little bit of history and talking about U.S. history. I think it's Thomas Jefferson's wife was like, he would come home and he was passionate and he could do some things, but like some of the stuff he would ask her and she'd be like, seriously, that's what you're doing? How about this? And he'd go back the next day with this great idea that was all hers, like, I don't think people really understand some of the people behind the people, some of the staff behind the people, or the spouses behind the people that are leading the way. It is
the volunteers behind the organization.
The volunteers behind
the
organization.
It's not the board of directors. It's not the executive director. It's the volunteers who get things done, who make the difference in the world.
Yeah. They are your organization. When you interact with an organization at whatever capacity, you're not always talking to the board. You're not always talking to the executive director or the founder. A lot of the time you're talking to a volunteer, and how you treat your volunteers and what they know about the organization, understand how it all works together, understand your why and their mission. If they can't answer those simple questions, you've now created a problem for your organization by not training your volunteers, and they also feel less appreciated and all these other things. But if you have them on board and they understand what their role is and how they're really helping the organization move forward, and someone interacts with a volunteer, oh man, make you break your sales, make you break your donations, make or break your event, all of those things based on who they happen to interact with. And a lot of times it is your volunteers.
Yeah.
So what made you get involved in focus on volunteers as your primary focus?
It was a rather convoluted path. I've been volunteering since I was a kid, and yeah, years and years in the volunteer sector. But as a career, it's fairly new. I was a cabinet maker by trade. So not everybody's going to be able to see, but I have all these bookshelves in the back, and yeah, I built them. I build things. Those
are Karen Knight originals available one day only for auction. Here we go.
No, they're not.
No,
They're not.
they're
I
not.
am not giving up my bookcases. But yeah, no, I used to build kitchen and bathroom cabinets and things like that. So I've come a different way. But I was sitting, I had a really bad day at work one day, and I sat down and thinking, why am I doing this? I'm spending my life making rich people's houses fancier. And that just isn't satisfying my need to make a difference in the world. So what would I want to do instead? And I look back on my volunteering history, and I want to help volunteers, help organizations help their volunteers take their mission forward. I want to make it easier for people to make a difference in the world. And the easiest way to do that is to have really good volunteers. So I'll teach you how to have really good volunteers, how to find them, how to train them, how to manage them, and how to appreciate them.
Yeah, they're out there helping you make a difference and accomplish a mission. You got to treat them right, let them know how valuable they are, and make sure that they can take care of the next generation. That's fantastic. If you had a magic wand and you can wave it over the nonprofit world, and whatever you decided was changed, what would be that thing?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, I think what it would be to give more appreciation and not responsibility, but authority to the volunteer coordinators, to the people who are actually on the ground leading the volunteers, is to give them their due, because a lot of times they don't have it. They're just some minor person that gets kind of shoved around. Have them speak to the board of directors on a regular basis. Have them be one of the inner circle of the organization and help make decisions, because the volunteers do so much. And that is your touch point. That's the one staff member who touches your volunteers daily. Have them involved in all the decision making so that so the volunteers are properly taken care of. Because so many of them, the volunteer program has no budget. They have no authority to do anything. And that's just wrong, because it's the volunteers driving your mission forward, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, have the understanding of the importance of your volunteer coordinator or volunteer manager, whatever you want to call them. That would be a big thing for me.
Yeah, and you never know what you're cultivating. You might have a problem with your office and need custom cabinets made. You didn't know that Karen Knight was in there and she could make you the most fabulous cabinets, but you say she's just as my least favorite word, just a volunteer. You have no idea what she's capable of. Or you have a CEO. I've seen this a lot. CEOs of big organizations, they'll get interested and they'll hear about an organization, they'll go volunteer to see what kind of goes on without anyone like that undercover boss or undercover billionaire or whatever. They go in and do the behind the scenes stuff. I've seen that where a CEO of a local company will go kind of behind the scenes as a volunteer to see if they're interested. Well, if you haven't taken care of some of them bad apples, if you treat your volunteers poorly, if they have no budget, or you have a poor leader in there yelling at the volunteers, what are the chances? What are the odds that CEO is going to make some kind of major gift or contribution to your organization?
Exactly. Yeah, can you imagine a CEO coming into that museum I was telling you about and made to sort books, right? Because nobody had anything for them. Yeah, you have to treat your volunteers right. You really do. And the best way to do that is take care of your volunteer coordinators. Make sure they're trained, make sure they know how to do all of this stuff.
Absolutely. Really, it's just people taking care of people.
Okay.
Where's the best place for our audience today to connect with you, Karen?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn, Karen Knight Consulting. I'm on Facebook, Karen Knight Consulting, and my website at karenknight.ca. Note the CA, I am Canadian. So ca.com.
karenknight.canadian karenknight.ca. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Karen.
Thank you so much, Travis. It was fun.